it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story, and thank you for joining me. I am so excited to bring you this guest, and I can't even call Alan a guest. I actually say, join us for a lovely conversation between two dear friends, two business associates, colleagues. We've worked clients together. We've done so much. Let me tell you a little bit about Alan. He's an international speaker. He's a TEDx speaker. He's an executive coach. He works with teams. He's also does a lot in helping people in their public speaking areas. He's written an amazing book, The Connection Challenge. He truly believes in the connection and emotional intelligence and how people speak and connect in business and in this world. One of his major achievements that I always find very, very cool is he was the publicity team responsible for the launch of the Harry Potter series back in the day. And he talks a little bit about this on his TEDx talk. So if you want to check that out, it's the magical power of shared purpose. I've had the honor of working with Alan. I've brought him in. He's worked with my clients. We talk business, we talk life. Alan and I basically are just talk. And I think that's one of the amazing connections and purposes of why I wanted to bring Alan on as a guest today. Is the transparency, openness, honesty, and authenticity of his work is absolutely transformational. So, Alan, thanks for joining me here.
Thanks for having me, Ivy. Ivy, you're like a sister to me.
I know.
I've slept in your home.
We do that brother and sister thing. On the best side.
We could totally have been brother and sister, and we probably would have gotten along really well. Unlike a lot of brothers and sisters. We come from the same people.
we truly come from the same core values and ethics. And Alan and I have shared stages over the years. Is my biggest clients, Alan is one of the key go-tos who I bring onto my team immediately because of the impact you make, in all honesty. So let's go back a little bit. How'd you get into this whole thing? What was your backstory?
Yeah, so I've always been something of a personal, professional development junkie from as early as I can remember, probably even before it was really the cool thing, the in thing. But my main career was in public relations and communications. And you talked about my experience leading the Harry Potter team and the publicity book launch. And for me, that was really my first major taste of what it's like to lead a team and help people be at peak performance and really grow talent. And so from that, I pivoted and moved into training and development at Scholastic. I was head of global training and development, which was a really big job. And I didn't have a lot of experience doing it, but I loved it. Then in the capacity, hired a lot of executive coaches and thought, gee, that's something that I'd like to do when I grow up. And so parallel, I got my MBA in management and then went out and got my training certificate. But I still wasn't quite ready to hang a shingle. So I went back and did some more communications work in some of the fields that I love, mainly entertainment and luxury brands. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I really wanted to have my own coaching business. So I left my corporate job and hung out my shingle. And right at that time, the economy collapsed. And so good timing, Alan.
And it's funny because we did it, Alan and I met back when we were both early in our certification process, and we both hung out our shingle about the same time. The economy tanked. And what people say is like, oh, can you be, hey, Ivy, or hey, Alan, economic times. It's like, hey, been there, done that. We built a business during poor economy.
Right, exactly. It was like, oops, I'm in business now. It's like I was kind of marketing savvy, but I didn't really know what it was like to grow a business. And And so what I did, so I started initially just coaching people, Wall Street people who are out of work, who were having crises of identity. Now that I'm not making a gazillion dollars a year, what do I do next? And then started getting into career coaching initially, and then pivoted into executive coaching and team coaching, leadership development, and all that. So it's been wonderful the past 20 years having my own business and working with people like yourself, Ivy, and being open to new and exciting opportunities and challenges that the market is always presenting. Doing more of the kinds of work that you do around transition, succession planning, team development, and growth. And I love it. I love everything about coaching, and you and I are pioneers in that field in a lot of ways, because it's really
Yeah,
people didn't
like
even know what
when we
professional
started
coaching.
pedaling, right? When we started pedaling this bicycle and figuring out this business, and I had the experience of running a business for 20 some odd years. And, I thought I knew what I knew until I didn't know what I didn't know, and had my own internal obstacles show up for me. Um, it was truly learning the growth of a new type of industry. When you and I started, people didn't know what this industry was. It was a huge educational learning curve. And today, in the work that we're both doing, we're in good sized organizations and helping them with their strategies, their succession plans, and being the best leaders to navigate the decisions that our day-to-day life in leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting because when we started out in this business, people were lifers often. They had been in their jobs for a really long time, and it was a lot of the discussions were more about how to get to the next level and how to get to the next level and how to get to the next level. And today, it's really much more about helping leaders and their teams navigate change and build capacity. And they may be in the same job. They may not be getting promotions upon promotions, but their jobs are getting bigger. They have to learn how to work in these matrix kinds of organizations. They have to be able to pivot in the moment. They have to cross train because the market and the needs of the market may change in a moment. So it's exciting. And I think COVID presented a whole bunch of new opportunities for the way that people work in these hybrid organizations. And we've been there, and we have to be
Right.
there and help people through those changes.
And it's interesting because I truly think we have been on this world advancement since COVID, right? And what I'll mean by this is between technology and what we learned with technology and COVID, we're kind of reliving the Industrial Revolution
Mhm.
of how things are being done. We had the introduction of AI. We have the hybrid workforce, in person, completely virtual, and these are by millions upon millions of dollar companies that are doing things in a lot of different ways. And what's important in the conversations you and I have is maintaining the communication and the culture. And I think that is so, when you and I talk, when we're not being recorded, um, about everything and its brother, there's
Mhm.
a large heart in this conversation of maintaining the communication. Your book, The Connection Challenge, my book, From the Bar to the Boardroom, is core communication, and making sure that doesn't get lost.
I so agree with you. I think the issues and the challenges that the external environment presents organizations are ever changing. Today it's how is artificial intelligence going to replace us, and the markets and the dynamic shifts in the financial world. Things are different every minute, but interpersonal relationships, emotional intelligence, emotionally intelligent conversations, core people skills, human skills are they don't change. It's
Yeah.
like how do we navigate conflict among teams? How do we give feedback?
How
And
do you give good feedback? How do you give
exactly.
good, and I will say you brought an amazing, amazing training to one of my clients that people are still talking about. And I'm not going to say too much about it, but I'm just going to say that airplane experience training that
Mhm.
you brought to the table and what they learned communication wise was so amazing. And then I did a training just a couple of weeks ago on difficult conversations that we've talked about,
Mhm.
you and I.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because now we're having the communications, positive and the challenged communication
Mhm.
on Teams, on Zoom, in person. There's so many ways where the olden days, you were across the table from somebody.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I've been working a lot with companies right now using the radical candor model, which is Kim Scott's model, and it's amazing because so many of us don't want to give the difficult feedback, and so she talks about this thing called ruinous empathy, which is where it's like where I won't tell you that there's spinach in your teeth, but I'll go and tell everybody else, that Ivy had spinach in her teeth where it's just like,
Ew.
yeah, I know. It's just no, just be direct and say, I think this is something that you need to know. And because it will make us all better, because who wants to be, looking at spinach in your teeth? I'll get off that analogy. But but I think and it's shocking to me, Ivy. I've gone into companies as you have, like, huge global organizations. Senior teams don't know how to give each other feedback. And you would think this was something that they would have learned in their early years as employees, but those often they get promoted because they have great technical skills, but not because they've learned some of the most important interpersonal skills. It's
You know,
fascinating.
I think that's a huge point. And we're both seeing this out there, and we're seeing a couple of things out there in the marketplace. You know, it's great. People are growing within organizations. We want to see people growing within organizations. And all of a sudden, they went from like a direct report to 10, but they
That's
never had any training on how do you deal with 10 people.
that's
You
right.
can still do your job, make sure their deliverables, right? And the cohesiveness of the department, and it's just like, well, you did one, like do 10. What?
That's right. It's like suddenly they are tasked with coaching and developing all of these people who report to them while also having all these other responsibilities. And usually the other responsibilities will take priority over the coaching and development of their reports. I guess in some ways that's good for us because we get brought in and we end up coaching and developing those people. But everybody needs to learn those skills, and we can also come in there and teach and train them those
Right.
skills.
And I think that's important. And I think it's important for leaders to know how to get their best out with working with their team on a regular basis. I said there was a couple of things you and I are seeing. I think the other thing that we're both seeing out there in the marketplace is COVID was the onset of people's awakening of like, you know what, I'm not going to do this forever. I might try planning my exit strategy. I might start retirement. I know people think succession planning, which we both do an enormous amount of in our business, in working together is about retirement. And that is true, but it's also about me at 45 who created a succession plan to get out of my own printing company.
Hmm.
Right? It's people end up exiting at various times, not just retirement. And how do we build a leadership team that continues to grow as people go on to do their next steps? And they were a huge contributor to the organization.
That's right. So there are a few things that come to mind. I think first of all, there's the knowledge transfer, And I'm working right now with one leader, and he's already groomed his successor, is grooming his successor. But he was told now by the board that he's got to stick around another year because his successor isn't ready. So he's got to continue to groom this guy and get him ready. But it's not just the knowledge transfer, it's also instilling in that person who is succeeding the person who is leaving, retiring, moving on, uh, with with those critical thinking skills and empowering that person to also make decisions for themselves that do also align with the core values and those things that are pretty much set in stone. So while also being open to the fact that because things may change, the culture may also need to change to accommodate for it. So, but it is about building those competencies in the person that's going to take over for you and then the people that are reporting to that person, so that when you ultimately do retire or move on, you can feel really good that your legacy is intact.
Right.
And then also we need to coach that leader who is exiting about what they about what's next for them, because I know personally and for a fact that retirement is not all that it's cracked up to be. So, especially if
Tell us a little bit how you know that, Alan.
well, as someone who dabbled in an extended sabbatical that I thought was going to become a full time early retirement, I realized I was just miserable, because if you have the energy and you still enjoy what you're doing and you have the autonomy and freedom to create what it is that you want to create, and your job isn't shackling you, then like, why wouldn't you want to keep working? I got a 95-year-old dad who still publishes columns in newspapers, and I think it's keeping him around. So I just think that idea that we're going to go off to the sunset and just golf 24/7 and just be at the country club, just sipping margaritas all day. I think that may be fun for a little bit, but most of us want a legacy and to make a contribution that is going to be greater than that.
And I think it's important to know what you want to do. Like, what do you want your contribution to be? What do you want your legacy to be? And I don't think that's a 70-year-old question anymore. I think it's something
No,
that starts in your 40s and 30s,
absolutely.
and that you're building a legacy from early on. Um,
Absolutely.
and we're conscious of what's the mark we want to leave on the world. And it's, before Alan and I started the recording today, it's Alan and I. So we sat and we chatted for
Pivots.
try to keep
Pivots.
it to a half hour today. And we're talking about our families, and we're talking about Alan's dad and my mom, and the legacy. I think about what I'm grateful for, and it's what my mother taught me about business. It's what my mother taught me about being a human being, and the legacy she left behind. And that was not in her 70s. It's not in our time. We want to be conscious every step of the way of the legacy we're leaving and the impact we leave in the world.
So Ivy, I just saw Hamilton again the other night, and
Woohoo!
there's a line in Hamilton in one of the songs. It's who lives, who dies, who tells your story. And those words really, really stuck with me, because it's granted, after we die, we don't know what this is the story that's being told about us and our work. And a lot of people say, well, I don't care because I'm not going to be around. But if you care about leaving behind something important, then you want to help shape the narrative. And I think that I love when 40-year-old clients of mine are beginning to ask those questions, because that means that they want lives that have meaning, and they want to make that dent on the universe. They want to leave something behind for their children and their children's children, and they want to leave the world better than they left it. And I think that at some point if we're conscious, we're all going to ask ourselves that question. And I think we're going to ask that question of our employees and our teams, and we're going to help them think about something beyond just providing for ourselves and our families. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And
Right.
right. But I think the world is calling all of, and that's often that's also why I do so much work with public speaking and helping people tell their stories, because we all can have so much impact with our experience and what we've gone through to help others.
And I think, I love what you have have been doing in helping people be stronger speakers, tell their stories, understanding how to own their stories. I know how you and I worked so hard on that early on. Or I'll shift hard to diligent. And most importantly, we think about, oh, well, I don't need to worry about it because I'm not a speaker like Alan or Ivy. Yet every time we communicate, like I tell my best client stories sometimes, and I own the skill set when I'm working one-on-one with the client, and there's a story that will help them move forward, and understanding how to communicate it and craft it. And that story, if we're running, when a client is preparing to be in front of just even their team or a boardroom, and how important that is to be able to clearly communicate and move that room through a speaking ability.
That's right. And the work that we do also with business owners who are thinking about selling, getting ready to sell, what's the story that they want to tell to those potential buyers or investors, and what's the story that they want to tell to their employees to bring them along on that journey when it's time. Storytelling is everything in business. It's important to our marketing, to our sales, to our speaking. I think we all have incredible stories that need to be told, and I'm so inspired with the speakers that I work with, because they're not just, and again, like, we can use storytelling to grow our own businesses, and that's great, but telling stories that that are going to raise awareness for big social issues, and that's wow, the impact that we can have by sharing even just with one person. We can change lives. Our stories may not be for everyone, but for one person, it may be exactly the thing that they need to hear, that could even save their lives.
Yeah, and I think knowing what story to share and why is so important. And when we share a story, it's not about us.
Never.
It's about the impact and the transformation and the reason to share that story, and that raising that level of consciousness is huge.
Spot on.
So, Alan Cohen, thank you for joining me here today on Her Success Story.
Thank you, because you know what? His success relates to her success, and her success relates to his success, and we are all successful when we're all successful.
And listeners, thank you for joining us today. Alan, how can our community find out more about you, reach out to you? I know you're avid on LinkedIn. You're an avid social media person.
Alan Samuel Cohen, all the time, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and website alansamuelcohen.com. Come check me out. Engage.
That is the most important thing, listeners. Take a breath and think, what was important to you? What was your takeaway from listening to this episode? Write it down somewhere. Make a jot a note in your phone, write it on a sticky pad, doesn't matter. But then most importantly, make a decision of what you're going to take forward from that piece of insight. And then always share that. Feel free, share it with myself, share it with Alan. We are a team in so many ways. Alan, I hope to see you soon.
Yes, very.
Listeners, stay tuned for more great episodes. If this was a good piece of content for you, if you found this meaningful, pass it forward to somebody it could help. Hit subscribe, and see you next week with more great guests, just like my friend Alan.
Don't need your approval anymore, 'cause I've got mine.